the main ways that ticks are going to find basically their meal is going to be one, movement, two, heat, and then three is going to be that CO2. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's a generalization, but it's a very useful paradigm for us to think of it in terms of risk and tick bite prevention. Yes, and so that's why, for instance, if you can, walking in the middle of trails helps, right? Because you're further away from that vegetation and you're not brushing up against that vegetation, and they don't have a chance to orient towards you.
Well, I think that's a really good lead in to ask, what can hunters, what can hikers, what can people do to protect ourselves when we're out in the scary woods and grass?
A few things that, for instance, I use when I'm hiking with my family is starting with just a layer of barrier protection with my clothes. So ticks typically transfer at thigh level or below. So they're on the vegetation and they're going to transfer there, and then they stereotypically crawl up. So if a tick ever transfers and you watch it, you'll see it just starts crawling up. So if you create an ascending barrier out of your clothes, just to start, so tuck your pants into your socks, tuck your shirt into your pants, you're not giving them entry. You can imagine if your shirt was untucked and over your pants, if they're crawling up, then they're crawling right up underneath the shirt, right? But if it's tucked in, then they just transfer onto the shirt and keep crawling. So you can just make a physical barrier. I use permethrin spray. And so you can get clothes that are pre-treated with permethrin, or you can treat your own clothes with permethrin. And a couple caveats to it are wet permethrin is super toxic to cats. So it's just something I always really like to point out. It's on the warning label. Read the warning label very, very carefully. And it's commonly available. The sprays are available, for instance, at Farm and Fleet, or Lowe's or Home Depot, any stores that would be affiliated with outdoor work or recreation. So I treat our clothes with permethrin, and permethrin gives ticks a condition known as hot foot. It actually kind of shocks the nerves of the ticks. It's a chemical kind of shock to the nerves. So when they transfer onto clothing that's been treated with permethrin, you can watch them. They'll crawl for a second, and then they kind of, and then they just fall off backwards. They just can't maintain contact anymore. Then we also use DEET on top of that. So we'll spray with DEET according to the label instructions. And again, DEET, I think everybody knows you can get it at your grocery store. And so for me, for my family, for when we're doing recreation outdoor, that's my base right there, is these ascending barriers, permethrin treated clothes, and DEET. And then also when you're outside, you can enact behavioral preventatives. So for instance, there's the fact that, when ticks transfer off vegetation, they're going to transfer off probably on your legs, sometimes maybe on the waist and chest, and then always crawl up. And so when I'm out, when we're collecting ticks for the program, or when I'm out for fun, I'm just kind of, glancing down as I'm walking, just kind of look down and just scan up from the feet to the chest. I tend to be pretty paranoid about it. I do it about every 10 meters or so. And then also wearing light clothing. Now I know that's not always going to be an option. But I found that when you have kind of a regularly patterned clothing, this kind of solid colored tick will usually stand out, especially if it's moving. But just doing that regular visual scan of the body, starting at the bottom, visually scanning up, visually scanning back down again, to catch any ticks that might be on the move. Staying to the middle of trails, or even when you're in the woods, when you're kind of in a nice open wood with very little mid-story, if you're not brushing up against vegetation, you're not giving ticks much opportunity to transfer. One exception to this, the Lone Star tick can just hang out under leaf litter, and they can just kind of crawl up on your boots. But you know, if you've got repellents on, they're typically not gonna make it far past your boots. So just kind of not brushing up against vegetation. If you're walking on a trail, stay in the middle of the trail. Regularly do a visual scan for ticks, and use repellents.
Do you have any additional recommendations or suggestions for hunters specifically when it comes to possibly handling game or transporting game, or just anything else you'd like hunters to know about ticks?
So, you know, on my end, what I have the experience with is being out in the tick-filled environment and preventing tick bites. And so kind of going back over the things I had said earlier about using repellents and clothing and behavior, in addition to that, when you return home, there's solid evidence that taking a shower within a couple hours of returning home can also reduce the risk of tick bite. And that's because some ticks don't bite immediately. You know, maybe they crawled up your barriers and somehow managed to pass your repellent, and they got in your collar and they got down underneath. But they might spend a little while trying to find the perfect spot. And so taking that shower could wash them off before they ever actually bite. So what I do when I come home, I undress right beside the washer. And if that's not a possibility, for instance, if I'm camping, I put my clothes in a plastic bag, like a plastic garbage bag. You know, for instance, I wouldn't take my clothes off in my tent. So I would take my clothes off into a plastic bag and leave it outside. Or if I'm coming home, I'm going to take my clothes off right next to the washer or the dryer. What's really required is heat. So water doesn't kill ticks, heat kills ticks. So, you know, high heat in the dryer for 15 minutes or hot wash cycle and then hot dryer. But whatever it is, I'm going to take my clothes off right there, and I'm going to expose them to high temperatures to kill any ticks that might be on the clothes. Then I'm going to go take a shower. And then when I get out of the shower, I'm going to do a thorough tick check. And a tick check can be done visually. It can be done with a partner. It can also be done by feel. So for instance, areas of my body that I can't necessarily see, I can still run my fingers over them. And since the tick's only attached at one point, I'll feel it kind of flapping up against my finger. And then I can get a closer look at that. So, you know, those are kind of the behavioral interventions that you can do at home. So you're out in the field and you've got behavioral interventions, and you're at home and you've got behavioral interventions too. And I'm dumping all this information right now. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. And also, once you're used to the routine of it, you don't even think twice about it anymore. Additionally, if you have companion animals, consult with your vet about what you can do to prevent ticks and tick bites on your animals, but that's going to involve tick checks of your animals too.